What is going on, everybody? Very excited for today's video. Going to be breaking down my top 10 quarterbacks for the 2025 NFL Draft. Before we go player by player, I do want to talk about the class overall compared to how it stacks up against other quarterback classes. I'm sure many of you have heard this is just not a great quarterback class, certainly at the top. It just aren't going to have 5 first-round picks like we had last year, and it's always going to be a little bit harder to get excited about a quarterback class when that's the case. But I'm serious, you guys. I had so much more fun getting into the depth of this class than I think I ever have with a quarterback class. And I think there's a reason for that. I mean, between the extra year of eligibility that all of these guys got because of COVID and the new transfer rules, these guys are now going to situations where they're actually playing. They are starting earlier in their career. They're getting those live reps. They're learning from their failures and truly developing in a way that I just don't think before these transfer rules, the depth of quarterback classes was really doing. We would see guys that had talent, but were 1-2 year starters that just didn't have the live reps. Well, 9 out of the 10 guys on this list we're going to talk about here today transferred at least once. That is very telling. And then, of course, getting that extra year to stay in school and actually play, it's exciting because there's always been these toolsy prospects that go 3rd, 4th round, but it really is just hard to develop if you're not playing live football. It's a problem that the NFL has dealt with for a long time. They've had these experimental spring leagues, but it is just different if you're a college prospect going to the NFL, but you've actually gotten those live reps. And I really think this class, we're really seeing the fruits of those seeds that have been planted with those changes in the college landscape over the years. And while this class isn't super exciting at the top, I have 5 names with legitimate draftable day 2 grades in this class. To put that in perspective, last year we had the 6 first-round guys. Spencer Rattler got a top 100 grade for me. I viewed him as a late 3rd round flyer. My QB7 has an almost identical grade to Rattler last year. Now, obviously, you hear Spencer Rattler, you may or may not get too excited. I don't think the Saints did great by a true developmental quarterback throwing him out there in year 1. The point is, the average 2nd or 3rd round quarterback is not going to hit. But the more of those dart throws you do get, the more of the Derek Carrs, Andy Daltons, Jalen Hurts, Dak Prescotts, there are starters that come out of those rounds, and the more of those darts we get to see thrown out of this draft class, the higher chance at least one of these guys is going to become a very relevant quarterback in the league. And this class really stands out to me in that way. I had a lot of fun getting into these guys, and I spent more time with non-first round quarterbacks trying to sort through how I stack them up, what are their strengths and weaknesses, than I ever have. And I actually wasn't really looking forward to this video because I've already done one-off videos on Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders, and I was like, wow, I'm just going to bore these guys talking about a bunch of backups in the league. But after I got through the research, I left very excited for this video to break down these players, what their strengths and weaknesses are, not necessarily to tell you with certainty which of these guys are going to hit, but to give you the profile so that you can see when these guys land in very nice, cozy situations, maybe in LA behind Matthew Stafford, or in Seattle as a guy to develop behind the aging Geno Smith at this point, or anywhere that has an exciting group of playmakers or quarterbacks, you can look back and say, all right, these are real dudes that could be starting in the league. But that's enough blabbering. Let's get into this class. We're going to start at number 10, and after I said all that, my number 10 quarterback is the one guy on this list that I really just don't think has that real starting potential, so I'm not going to spend too much time on him. But I do want to talk about Max Brosmer, who cracked the top 10. Go Gophers, baby. We got one in the top 10. But he's a really nice high-floor quarterback prospect. One of the funnest things you'll notice with his game is that he has the fastest release mechanics in this class. And his release mechanics, the speed of it, is going to be up there with the fastest releases you'll ever see coming out of the college level. He really has that Aaron Rodgers flip-it-a wrist, and the ball is out. When a pressure gets in up the middle, he can speed that up, get that ball out in a hurry. He can distribute the ball really, really well. If he comes in as a backup in the league and you want to run RPOs and get the ball in the hands of playmakers, that little half second that you save with his release time can actually help them get a half step on the outside to set up run after catch opportunities, just get a little bit more space out there. For what you're getting in Max Brosmer as more of that distributor, point guard, game manager type, that is an elite trait, being that release, that he can weaponize. That's not the only thing, though. By college standards, I would say he is surgical with his processing in the short to intermediate game. The ball comes out quick. He doesn't take a lot of sacks. He can anticipate throws, especially into the intermediate middle part of the field. He's not just taking 3-yard slant routes. He can actually take his eyes into that second level, convert on a 3rd and 8, throw that dig over the top of linebackers. Where he's more limited is having a really strong arm, having accuracy deep down the field, really having that full breadth of throws that you look for in a starting quarterback. It's not really all in his bag. He does make some nice vertical throws, but it's just not something I'm counting on from him. He missed just as many vertical throws as he hit, in my opinion. Maybe not exactly 50-50, but it wasn't the ratio you're looking for in a potential starter in terms of that vertical passing game. But he can hit it. I don't think he has a noodle for an arm. It's a below average arm by NFL standards, and it just is going to limit his upside. And I think with a little bit of a weaker arm, with that lack of range and the types of throws he can make, with it kind of hurting his ability to consistently command the football, throws do get away from him because he targets the middle of the field so much. He can leave it a little bit high, and then it's in the hands of a safety, like that type of stuff. And he's just not a great athlete. He's not this exceptional scrambler or someone that's going to be nasty in the design run game. But he's a really high floor, kind of textbook day 3 backup quarterback type of pick where you spend a 5th or a 6th round pick to bring in a high floor guy that can be your QB2 right away, assist you in the right game plan with the right playmakers to help keep a season alive, get you a win or two in the record book, and do all of that on a cheap rookie contract. My high-end comp on him is Case Keenum, so that's kind of what we're talking about with Max Brosmer. But let's go ahead and jump up to my number 9 quarterback here, and this is already where we start to talk about talented quarterbacks, at least physically talented quarterbacks, that if the development is right, if the landing spot is right, maybe, just maybe, even my QB9 here could become a starter in the league. In fact, Quinn Ewers, my number 9 ranked quarterback here, the high-end comp I have on him is Derek Carr. Now, while I praised Ewers' upside, I would say, like Derek Carr is at the NFL level, Quinn Ewers is by far the most frustrating quarterback to watch in this class. It's one thing to watch a Riley Leonard, who's not going to make my list today, out of Notre Dame, and you watch the tape and you're like, yeah, that's just not an NFL QB. For the record, I don't have a draftable grade on Riley Leonard. You can go ahead and read his write-up on my Patreon, where I've written up every player I've evaluated. But it's one thing to watch a guy like Riley Leonard and you're like, yeah, that's not an NFL QB. It's another thing to watch Quinn Ewers when I wrote down his high-end throws show the best combination of timing, anticipation, and arm talent in the class. If you just make a cut up of his 10 best throws, you'll say, that's him. That's the high upside NFL quarterback right there. But it's extremely frustrating when he gives you one of those plays, and then the next 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 plays in a row make you want to pull your hair out, and he looks like he's never played the position before. It's an extremely exhausting process to watch this player. It's all there, but the list of inconsistencies and weaknesses in his game is long. I'll rattle them off. Accuracy is all over the map. I know he dealt with an injury in his final season, but this is something I was aware with him watching all those Texas guys in 2023 as well. He just has the arm talent to get it wherever he wants, but oftentimes he overcooks it or he's just not anticipating correctly. There are just way too many misses on film. I think he needs to gain a much better understanding of when it's appropriate to rip the fastball and when he needs to layer the ball with touch. He's got both of those clubs in his bag, if you will, but he just doesn't seem to have a good feel for when to use which club, if that makes sense, or when to use which pitch if you're a baseball guy. I think when he drops back to pass, his eyes get stuck downfield. He's got that tunnel vision at times, and he can be just completely oblivious to rushers. We all saw the game-defining moment against Ohio State where Sawyer kind of comes in, wins quickly, and gets the strip sack. That happens all the time on Quinn Ewers tape, where he just doesn't sense that rush. And he had 20 fumbles over the last 2 years, many of which are times where he's just getting hit and he's not expecting it. There's a lot of Daniel Jones in him with that. And I do wonder, by the way, if he happens to have small hands. I don't think we got a hand measurement from him. We should get that at the combine. But you pair the kind of random, inexplicable, sporadic accuracy issues and all the fumbles, I do wonder if he just doesn't consistently get a strong grip on that football. It'll be something to see at the combine that could confirm some of those things we're seeing on film there. But to keep going down your lists of weaknesses, he has truly bottom of the barrel feel inside the pocket. Not just what I talked about where if a rusher gets in quickly, he doesn't always see it. I'm talking about those moments where you want the quarterback to calmly manage that space in the pocket as the pocket is naturally breaking down. You're going to hear me talk a lot about the difference between pocket feel and the ability to sense and mitigate pressure. To break it down real quick, pressure management is related to when pressure gets in quickly, how do you sense it, and are you able to deal with it? Pocket feel is much more not about what do you do when you are pressured, it's how do you manage the pocket when you aren't pressured. To me, that is equally as important when it comes to evaluating a quarterback's pocket presence. And in the case of most quarterbacks, you might be able to sense pressure and do something about it, but it is that sort of preternatural feel for that space in the pocket to deal with the natural decomposition of the pocket, to know when and how to use your feet to extend plays, whether that's in the pocket or out of it. For example, if a defensive tackle crosses your guard's face, are you able to feel that space, step to the left, win that angle for the guard, and reset in the pocket to buy more time for you to make that first read or climb to your second read until you find a higher percentage throw down the field? Or do you fluster and get to your check down because you've got a clock in the back of your head? And of course, if your line does get driven back and you recognize that you're in trouble, are you able to know when and how to use your feet to get out of the pocket and extend plays? So that's the main difference. When it comes to Ewers, as bad as some of his moments when he does get pressured and some of the fumbles he has in those situations, he does at least sometimes sense it and do something about it and sidestep a blitz and make a sidearm throw. There's some decent moments in those situations. But when it comes to the pocket feel, sensing that natural decomposition of the pocket and what to do about it, there is none of that. He has true bottom of the barrel pocket feel. That also is going to lead to him consistently throwing the ball short of the sticks on critical downs. We saw it in the Georgia SEC championship game. In overtime, there's a 3rd and 10. He's got a clean pocket, and he just throws the shorter option instead of stepping into the pocket, hitting his deeper option. And by the way, I can't show you guys Texas tape this year. It's getting blocked big time because whoever owns their footage hates you guys and doesn't want you to be able to see clips of their players. But you're just going to have to take my word for it, or maybe you caught a Texas game or two and you know exactly what I'm talking about. But that is a really frustrating weakness on Quinn Ewers, and it's the biggest thing that I've harped on Derek Carr over the years as well. Part of why that comp comes in there. It's not that you can't become a starter with bottom of the barrel pocket presence, but it does certainly limit your ability to make stuff happen when you can't utilize that space inside the pocket naturally. So to me, he is a guy with the traits, right? He was a five-star quarterback. I think his arm is stronger than he gets credit for. He's getting a lot of crap for his lack of arm talent. I will say he was battling an injury. I think his high-end throws show that he arguably has the strongest raw arm in this class. It's just a matter of, can he weaponize it consistently? The answer to that is definitely no right now. He's got his flashes of good processing. He's got his flashes of really high-end anticipation throws. Like, he does do some really exciting NFL stuff, but what's in between those plays is exhausting to watch. And to me, this also just comes down to he just doesn't pass the eye test to me. And he doesn't pass the vibes test either. This is just not a player I'm betting on, having seen a lot of them over the last 2 years with a lot of talent. Xavier Worthy, Jatavion Sanders, Jonathan Brooks, Adonai Mitchell, Jordan Whittington, all last year. He's got a bunch of offensive linemen that are getting drafted. This year he's got first round receiver, second round receiver, maybe a third round tight end. Like, he's had endless talent around him, and I just don't think he gets the most out of it. At the end of the day, he gets a 5th round grade from me, almost as a default grade because of the theoretical traits and upside. But if you want my real honest opinion, if I'm the GM sitting in the draft room, I am definitely letting someone else draft Quinn Ewers. We would have to be talking about like Mr. Irrelevant to maybe take a chance on him, bring him in as a QB3. My gut tells me this guy's going to be playing in the UFL before long, but your gut's not always right. He was injured. He's still young. Maybe something clicks, but personally, I'm letting someone else draft Quinn Ewers, my QB9. All right, before we go to my QB8, got to tell you guys about the sponsor for today's video, the #1 ticketing app out there, SeatGeek. I've tried all of the other apps. I always find myself back at SeatGeek to the point that I hardly even look at the other apps anymore. The best user interface with their color coding system on the seats that let you know which seats have the best value. Just look for the green dots. You know you're getting the best bang for your buck. They're really good about having actual images of what your seats are going to look like from that angle, from that row, whatever it might be. You'll get the tickets right there in that app. You don't have to jump through email chains and different hurdles, so you're stressing on your way to the gate. Do I actually have my tickets? They're going to be right there in that app. So if you were watching the USA hockey game the other night, or with the NBA All-Star weekend coming to a close, and you're looking to head to some of those events, or maybe you got concerts you want to go to, head over to SeatGeek, use code TFG10, and they will give you 10% off your next purchase, and you'll support my channel in the process. That's code TFG10 at SeatGeek, the #1 ticketing app out there, and have a great time wherever you're headed. All right, let's talk about my number 8 quarterback here. Already talking about, in my opinion, an early day 3 caliber pick. Will Howard, the national champion quarterback out of Ohio State, a big guy at 6'4", 235 pounds, the best size out of any quarterback in this top 10. He's got a strong arm, I think underratedly so based on some of the interactions I've had with a lot of people. And he was more athletic than I expected going in too. He actually, he's not a burner. He'd probably run like 4.7 or something. But he's got decent speed, and he's actually got good acceleration. He's got good power as a runner. In fact, my pro comp on him was less traitsy Will Levis. I obviously really liked Will Levis coming out. That's a different story. But compared to what we've seen from NFL Will Levis, who looks like he's probably going to fall in as a backup in the league, I don't think it's a bad comp. I do think you watch Will Howard, and in terms of the play style and what his strengths are that get you excited, but also what his weaknesses are that have hurt Will Levis in the pros, very similar as well. Again, I think Will Levis is a stronger athlete and had a stronger arm, but their lists of strengths and weaknesses are very similar. These are guys that want to kill you from the pocket with their cannon for an arm. They want to hit the top of their drop, sometimes with predetermined reads, just drop and shoot style quarterbacks that want to show off their arm. Not a whole lot of stopping to ask yourself if there's a defender in the way. Not a lot of checking to your second and third read, progressing through the defense in the way that you want to see from these guys at the next level. Not really a lot of assessing the pocket, showing off that pocket feel we've talked about, where you're kind of good at knowing when and how to use your feet to extend plays in and out of the pocket. He just doesn't extend plays a whole lot, even if when he does, he shows that he can. He can throw on the run. He can move more at his size than you would expect, but you just wish he did it more. And I think the exact same thing about Will Levis. just noticed we're talking about a couple of Wills here for whatever that's worth. But like a Will Levis as well, you are going to be talking about a guy that when the rush does get in quickly, he can sense it and do something about it. If a rusher comes straight through the middle or your right tackle gets beat pretty quickly, he does have much better feel for that than someone like a Quinn Ewers because he is big and strong. He can step up, he can break a sack and extend the play or get rid of the ball. That is a very positive aspect of Will Howard's game that I liked. And then just one more comparison to a Will Levis. While he's got a strong arm, the accuracy, the command of the football is not what you want to see. Balls just get away from Will Howard. He short arms some. He's got a very quick release, but I don't know that he always gets full control of the football. There are some wobblers on tape where he's trying to throw a deep out or a hitch route, and it falls a yard or two short. I think those are the throws people see in frustrating moments and come to the conclusion that his arm is pretty weak. I see the velocity when he really grips it and rips it, but he's got to be able to throw the ball with more consistent velocity and more consistent accuracy in that way. So got to find a way to improve that. And then the last thing that does really bother me about Will Howard, and it pairs with that kind of drop and shoot mentality, the lack of a real pocket presence to extend plays in and out of the pocket, but he throws the ball short of the sticks on third down, fourth down, way too often. Now, this could have been an Ohio State thing where they're saying, hey, don't try to do too much. Like, we trust our defense. We'll get the ball back. We'll be just fine. But you do want to see that on tape from quarterbacks, that they're able to create a little bit more to keep drives alive in those critical situations. So, traitsy player. Some people will scoff at the Will Levis comp. I get it. He's not going to go as high as Will Levis. His arm is certainly not as strong as Will Levis, but very similar mentality and similar weaknesses that he's just going to have to improve upon if he's ever going to be a starter in the league. So I've got him as an early day 3 kind of project draft and stash type of quarterback. I do like the traits. The last thing I want to say on him is he is a tough eval because he really did play by far his best football. He put out his best NFL tape when it mattered late in the season. He was great in the college playoffs. Those were the games I started with. And I was like, why? I sent out a tweet even. I was like, why is he not getting more QB3 buzz? Because I do think the processing was better in the playoffs. The arm talent was better. The accuracy was better. Everything was just cranked up with him. And that makes him a tougher eval. Do you really value that and think that's just who he is now? If so, I would understand you having Will Howard as your QB 3, 4, or 5 even, because I do think the tape in the playoffs could back that up. But you basically load up the rest of the season, even going to that last game against Michigan that they lost in the regular season. You load up his regular season. All of the weaknesses I talked about, those are just ramped up. And you do see some of those weaknesses in the playoff games too. It's not like he was perfect in the playoffs, but that does make the eval tough. It's like the Georgia game CJ Stroud thing where he had some questions all year long, and in the playoffs and the toughest competition, he just showed you who he was going to be at the next level, right? If that happens with Will Howard, I don't know that that's necessarily likely, but if that happens with Will Howard, I mean, there's some diamond in the rough potential there, right? Or did he just get hot and you still have a lot to weed out with his game? It's a fascinating note on him as a prospect, but he definitely helped his stock in the playoffs and showed us some real upside there. So he's my QB8, again, going round 4 or 5. So Howard and Ewers at least have like theoretical developmental upside to be a starter. Here at QB7 is where we get into those guys that I would consider on day 2 at some point. My next quarterback here is going to have a late 3rd, early 4th round grade. But this goes back to that intro. This is where the meat and potatoes of this draft are, where I think we're going to start to get some potential starters out of this group. So my QB7 is Dillon Gabriel out of Oregon by way of UCF and Oklahoma. And he is a small quarterback, the smallest guy we're going to talk about on this list. He's just over 5'10", 5'10 and a half, 202 pounds, very similar size to Kyler Murray. Not quite the athlete, not quite as strong of an arm, though. So he's small. He's a lefty. Doesn't have the strongest arm. He's going to have his limitations in the league, and I'm going to discuss what that could mean for him and his upside. But he's a smart, technically sound quarterback. Starting with his processing alone, I think he is the second best overall processor in this class. You can really tell, he's got 6 years of experience. He started games in 6 college seasons. He's the second highest passing yards player in college football history. So he's got a lot of reps. You would expect that to show that he reads defenses well and does NFL-style reads. He does. There's a lot of similarities to what we saw from Bo Nix coming out of Auburn in this offense last year. He plays on time. He avoids mistakes. He avoids negative plays. It's kind of the old Hal Mummy verbiage, the old air raid coach, where he said, never pass up an open wide receiver. And if Dillon Gabriel is looking at an open wide receiver, he is not going to pass up that throw. He just doesn't shoot himself in the foot and make things harder on himself than it needs to be. His size and his arm strength limitations already do that to him. So he's built his game around that. Another thing I like about him is a lot of these shorter quarterbacks don't attack the middle of the field because they can't see that area of the field all that well. Dillon Gabriel does. Now, he does do that in a way that we've seen with someone like Tua Tagovailoa, where he isn't throwing to the middle of the field necessarily all the time, at least because he can see it. He's throwing it because he understands the coverage and thinks that it's going to be there. And 8 or 9 times out of 10, he's right. He throws great anticipation throws over the middle of the field on a dig route or a crossing route, whatever it might be, because he read out the defense and understands the concept and trusts that it's going to be there. Well, maybe 1 out of 10 times, he didn't see that the safety was actually buzzing down or that the backside linebacker just bolted into a mid-read and he just threw the ball straight to a linebacker. There might be some of that with Dillon Gabriel, and I think I would just argue that, like a Tua, raises the floor of his ability as a passer to hit the middle of the field, but it is going to drag down the ceiling a little bit because he's going to probably have some ugly interceptions in that area of the field, and that's probably just something you want to live with him as a passer. But over the years, I've come to the agreement that I'd rather have the guy that at least tries it than a guy that just ignores the middle of the field entirely, like maybe a Russell Wilson, who's a shorter quarterback that really does that. I think it's held Kyler back at times as well. So he will attack the middle of the field. There's also a lot of full field progressions on tape. I think Oregon's offense limited that at times because they do have a lot of half field regressions. They do have a lot of screens and quick passes and stuff. So they're not always giving him the opportunity to go 1, 2, 3, snap that head through a full field progression, get to that backside dig or whatever it might be. But he did show on film when the opportunity to do that presented itself. He's more than capable of doing it. And this all adds up again to, in my opinion, the second best processor in the class. Not the first, though. There were some knocks I had on his processor. I do think, despite everything we said, at times he does get some tunnel vision. I think he does trust his pre-snap processor, and sometimes that's to a fault. He'll stare something down and be like, man, I really thought this was going to be there. And then he's either too slow to come off of it, or sometimes he actually forces some balls that put the ball in harm's way. And then I think there's a flip side of it as well with him on tape, where he can be a little bit check down happy and actually not let routes develop. Oftentimes in like hitch routes and corner routes, he'll just come off it a little bit quickly. And while I said he never passes up the opportunity to throw to an open wide receiver, he will come off of the read before the guy actually comes open. So there are some knocks there. And when you're talking about a guy that doesn't have all the traits, you're going to want him to be really an elite processor at the next level if he's going to be a good starter. So there's still there's still growth to occur there, even though he's a 24-year-old prospect and he is ahead of the curve. But there's still more to come there if he wants to be a starter in the league. I do think he does a lot of really good stuff with his feet when the pressure gets in quickly. He just really avoids the opportunity for the defense to make a negative play when they get those opportunities. So if the defense comes up with a really good blitz, slot corner comes in, linebacker comes in unblocked, he's really good at detecting that, and he's really quick to do something about it. And he almost always knows where that check down is. So he just doesn't take a lot of sacks. 13.9 pressure to sack percentage last year is very low. And it was low last year at Oklahoma too, 14%. So Sacked 15 times last year, sacked 19 times this year. He just doesn't take a lot of sacks and negative plays. That's a big positive, and he can scramble. He can make some throws on the run as well. I will say though, while he impressed me with what he can do when pressure gets in quickly, I didn't love his natural pocket feel. I left wanting him to use his legs much more, and I just don't think he has a great sense of how the pocket is breaking down around him and when it's appropriate to use his feet and how to use his feet to extend plays, because he does have some really good moments as a scrambler. He's a really good athlete. He makes some good throws on the run, but I think he left a lot of meat on the bones of plays by kind of just taking checkdowns too early, frankly, is what it came down to, and not really knowing how to have that natural ability to extend the play. And then even when he did break out of the pocket in scramble drill, it's tough because there's some really good throws on film when he did see guys open down the field. But I also left a little bit to be desired in that department too, just kind of that field vision on the run when the bullets are flying and things are chaotic. And maybe this is because he's a shorter guy, he just can't see everything as well. But there were a lot of times where guys are coming open down the field, and there's opportunities for big throws that he's just kind of either tucking and running or throwing it underneath. He only had 15 big-time throws in his final year at Oregon. A lot of those opportunities are going to come when he already doesn't extend the play as much as you want him to, but even when he does extend the play, he didn't get the most out of those plays because I don't think he saw everything down the field. So for a guy that I do consider very athletic and a natural thrower of the football, I think he can make throws on the run when he sees it, but he definitely was not Bryce Young. He was not Kyler Murray. He was not Russell Wilson in terms of overall creation. And really, all these shorter quarterbacks have had to succeed with that being a big part of their game. So just definitely something to note in terms of upside with him. The last thing I do want to give him credit for, but before we kind of talk about the physical traits and some of the limitations there, is he is very accurate. And even if he doesn't have a super strong arm, he does throw the deep ball with excellent accuracy. A couple throws got away from him because I just don't think he has incredible arm talent, and sometimes he's just not going to get all of the ball in that way, but accuracy is definitely a strength in his game as well. But yeah, we can kind of wrap up. The physical traits on him are going to be a major limitation. That's why he came in at QB7. Even though he's got a lot to like, and his college tape is not the 7th best quarterback in this draft. It's probably the 2nd, 3rd, or 4th in this draft. But if you project these traits to the next level, you're going to have some obvious limitations. We've already talked about a lot of the areas that the height impacts kind of his field vision and his play style. But I think another area that I didn't hit on is something Bryce Young really had to deal with that got better in year 2, but year 1, this led to the complete disaster class that we saw from Bryce Young. As a shorter quarterback, Dillon Gabriel, like a lot of these shorter quarterbacks, likes to get extra depth in his drops. That's going to invite tackles upfield. The way you mitigate that is by stepping back up, allow the tackles to seal that off. Gabriel would step back up, but you're entering more of a muddy pocket because you've allowed those tackles to swing so wide. And Bryce had to learn, if you're going to do that, you got to resettle. You got to treat that as a clean pocket. If Dillon Gabriel would have those rushers come straight wide upfield, he would step up, but then he was uneasy, and you would get some pretty ugly pocket presence moments in those situations. So how do you work on that? Is it as simple as the Panthers got to draft him and you teach Gabriel the same thing Bryce had to learn? It's one way or another, certainly something they're going to have to work on, and is something that is unique to a shorter quarterback because of those deep early drops. And to kind of even put more pressure on that idea, he had a great offensive line at Oregon. What happens when he gets to the league and those step-up lanes aren't as clean? It's just a different animal at the NFL. Bryce Young had to learn that very harshly. So I have some concerns going from a great O-line at Oregon to whatever, where does he land? You know what I'm saying? Does he go to a team with a great offensive line? That's going to be a big deal. at his size as well. The arm talent just isn't that great. He can make a lot of throws. He can push the ball downfield. I think he has good deep ball touch and accuracy, but there are going to be some throws that just aren't available to him. Those 20-yard deep outs from the opposite hash, crazy 40-yard throws down the field off platform. Like, it's just not all in his bag. And then the last thing is he is a lefty, so teams got to be comfortable with that. You're kind of flipping the playbook around. Receivers got to get used to the reverse spin on the ball. Everything just changes the dynamics. So does that make him more appealing to teams like Atlanta and Miami who have a lefty quarterback? Just another thing to sprinkle on top of all this. That just kind of all these things kind of add up and led to me pushing him down the board. Again, even if his tape is the second, third, or fourth best QB in this draft. All that said, I don't think he lets his size impact him too much. You're more just projecting some of the times that it does impact him. You're projecting that maybe hurting him even more at the next level. You're going to have plenty of questions with this guy, but I really do think there's a chance that he's a starter in the league. He's a really smart player. I love the idea, again, of him going to Miami as a backup for Tua. Perfect system fit, very similar play styles. That's my high-end comp on him is Tua Tagovailoa. Not just the lefty thing. I think the play styles, their strengths, their weaknesses are very similar. The downside, though, is rookie year Bryce Young. Even if Bryce was the number 1 overall pick, the product we saw from him as a rookie looked more like a day 3 pick who was undersized and overwhelmed. That's possible with Dillon Gabriel, but he's a fun player. I know a lot of people have him as like QB3, and honestly, I get it. He really is a smart, technically sound player, and I'm giving him a chance to be a starter in the league. But let's go to my number 6 QB, and this is my first grading tie, so I'll call him QB6, but he's really 5B. He had the same final grade as my number 5 QB that we'll talk about, but I do like to, have fun and say I guess I slightly prefer this guy over the other. Very different styles either way, but Jalen Milroe is my number 6/5B QB out of Alabama. And this is probably going to be the shortest conversation, at least within the top 7 guys, because it's much more clear-cut with Jalen Milroe. It's just, what's your tolerance for risk? He is a moldable ball of clay, a truly elite athlete. And it's always tough to say this about a quarterback, but I would just say he's the type of guy that if he does fail at quarterback, he could make an early career transition to running back and actually have an awesome career because he's got the size. He's 6'2", 225, and his just overall speed, change of direction, foot speed, acceleration, like everything is unbelievable for a quarterback, but would still be outstanding for a running back, especially at that size. And he's got rushing creativity as well. He's got power. He's got elusiveness. He has 32 missed tackles forced this last season, 35 the year before. If nothing else, Jalen Milroe can be an outstanding threat in a Taysom Hill type of role for you in short yardage and goal line situations. He can at least provide value to you as he develops. Now, I'm not saying he should switch to running back. I'm just saying in the event that you rolled the dice on him, whatever round it cost you, and it just didn't play out 2-3 years down the road, I think there's still a floor for him to have a position change. And that's been done before. Taysom Hill, there you go. There's one right there. But people get all sensitive when you suggest that. It has been done before. Denard Robinson went and played running back in the league. Marquise Gray, Terrell Pryor. It has been done. So it's something to think about if you draft him. Is there another alternative here where you could still get something out of him down the road? It's very realistic, I think, to think that with Milroe. But as a quarterback, there is plenty of flashes to say, yeah, we're taking him as a quarterback. We're developing as a quarterback, and he's obviously going to tell you to fuck off if you suggest a position change. But the development does have to come at some point, and it just frankly hasn't happened in his 4 years at Alabama yet. Not to say it won't in the league, but it has to happen. The processing of an NFL quarterback just isn't there. He is through and through a first read and run quarterback. There are moments where I feel like he's working, like trying to show that he can go through progressions, and you might find throughout the course of a game one or two times a game where he is snapping his head through, going through progressions, even making anticipation throws at times. Like, it's not for a lack of trying. It just, the breadth of tape just hasn't all come together. From a consistency standpoint, for the most part, you're talking about someone that's going to make his first read. If it's there, he'll throw it. Pretty good at not forcing it into harm's way. Like, he doesn't throw a lot of picks. But if it's not there, he's going to look at the rush. He's going to look to create. And at the college level, he can get away with a lot of stuff. Like, some of his runs are just absurd. But I think even in that case, when he scrambles, he's mostly looking to run. He doesn't keep his head downfield too much. There are some exciting throws in scramble drill for sure. But for the most part, you're talking about maybe 90% of the plays, he's a first read and run passer. 90% of the time, maybe 75% of the time, he gets out of the pocket. He turns into a running back. He tucks the ball. He's making guys miss. He's getting those explosive plays on the ground. That's just harder to do at the next level, as we know. So that's the main area that really has to develop. But there's another thing with Jalen Milroe that I just don't know if he's going to be able to improve. He's got really small hands, 8.5-inch hands. I don't have the mock draftable on him yet. I think that will be in the bottom. It has to be in the bottom 5 percentile of NFL quarterbacks. The only starter that I can think of that was under 9 inches, or at least closer to 8.5, was Kenny Pickett. He wore the 2 gloves. He obviously had his limitations. He's not starting in the league anymore. I think Joe Burrow is like just under 9 inches, but that has historically been a cutoff that teams get worried about. And when you watch Jalen Milroe's tape and it feels like it actively impacts his game, there's real concerns there. It impacts his game in 2 ways. Number one, he fumbled the ball 24 times over the last 2 years. If he gets hit and that ball is in his hand, it's just physics. It's going to jar loose, and it showed. He fumbled more than anybody in this draft, 24 times the last 2 years. That just can't happen, straight up. And then if you watch him, I think you get a really hard read on what his arm strength really is and what his accuracy is, because it's all over the map. And I just think that's because he's not always getting a full grip on the ball. Going through 4 games on him, I really had a hard time coming up with a final arm strength grade on him, because you see balls that just, they wobble, they don't have the velocity. He tries to throw a deep out and it just falls short. He can't get it there, or whatever, or he overcompensates and it sails over a guy's head. I think he's battling with that in terms of consistently gripping it and ripping it and having just those repeatable mechanics. Like, if that ball is coming out of your hand differently every other time because you just can't quite get your hand in the same spot, it is really hard to develop a consistent overall game, I think. Because it's always going to be in the back of your mind, like, is this ball going to go where I want it to? So that's a major concern. I don't know if he's got to switch and wear 2 gloves or what, but it's got to be something on your radar if you draft him, and really asking, the great quarterbacks coaches, like, is this something we can fix, or is this something that's just never going to get better? It's a tough question to answer. Now, the one thing I do want to give him a ton of credit for is, while I don't think we have a great sense of his overall pocket presence because he is such a first read and run quarterback, he's usually taking off by the time the pocket has fully developed. And in that case, if you're just basically never weaponizing your pocket feel, I'm going to grade him out poorly there. So he does get a D+ for pocket feel. I do think his ability to mitigate pressure when it gets in and weaponize his athleticism in that way is exceptional. He does sense rushers when they come through. If a D lineman wins quickly, he'll deploy that athleticism. He's a pain in the ass to get down in the backfield. And even if he's consistently beating you with his legs in those situations, usually scrambling, it's still a pain to deal with. So I do want to finish giving him a ton of credit there. And that is always something that'll just kind of increase his floor and help him develop and get out of trouble instead of taking some of those negative plays. So very much a moldable ball of clay. I guess I'm not a huge believer. I don't think most people are. His tape just frankly isn't that great. But to me, you get into the 3rd round, this type of athlete is absolutely worth gambling on. And he's got a very strong arm when he does rip it as well. So the traits are insane, but the tape is about as raw as it can get. But let's go to my number 5 quarterback here, someone I really enjoyed watching, and that is Kyle McCord out of Syracuse by way of Ohio State. Really a solid quarterback prospect, man. He's got a good arm. He's got good size. He's 6'2.5", 225 pounds. And what I like most about him as a player is he's just a noticeably thoughtful player out there. And where that stands out the most to me is like Shedeur Sanders. I think him and McCord are 1A, 1B, one way or another in this specific trait. Both him and Shedeur totally understand the value of ball placement. There's accuracy, there's how consistently do you hit your mark, but really being thoughtful. When you drop back and you let that ball ride, you're thinking, is an outside shoulder placement going to give my QB a more advantageous ability to catch this ball? Do I need to throw a touch and velocity? That's another part of this too, but maybe you need to slow a guy down a little bit. He's running a crossing route. He's running into trouble, but you want to kind of pin it on his back hip so the ball's not getting jarred out by a defender, or just simply being really thoughtful and making sure if you're throwing a crossing route, you're leaving it out in front of them to increase run after catch opportunities and make it more catchable. Feels like every time McCord lets the ball go, there's a mechanism in his brain. It's like, all right, we've made the decision, the ball's coming out, and now where exactly do we need to put it? There's a thoughtfulness about him that you really can tell the more you watch him that not every quarterback has, and I love that about McCord. Now, I think you hear he's a very thoughtful quarterback and assume he's got this super processor and he's always making the right decision. That's not necessarily the case. He's got a very aggressive processor. He makes a lot of good reads. He makes a lot of second read throws. There's a lot to like in that phase, but there are some ugly moments there. This is the biggest criticism on Kyle McCord. We'll just get out of the way now. He can get tunnel vision. He can be overconfident in what he saw, and there's a reason he led all of these quarterbacks in turnover-worthy play rate. His biggest issue is he throws the ball to the other guys too much, and there's no other way around it. If he can't continue to develop and decrease those turnover rates, it's going to be hard for him to be a starter in the league. So you got to know that's the big bugaboo with him. But beyond when he's making a bad read, which again is still, turnover-worthy play rate of 3.5%, it's more than the other guys, but we're talking 1 every 25 dropbacks. So the vast majority of his dropbacks, you are looking at a guy that's efficient with his first read, not going to pass up a lot of open throws, can throw with anticipation. If he's got a hitch route coming, he is one of these guys that he will throw the ball well before the guy comes back for that football. Just again, a thoughtfulness, making things easier on the receivers. I also really like how he can recognize and beat the blitz. He might be as good as any QB in this draft at beating the blitz. I think he gets the ball out quickly when he needs to, but he's also really good at doing something the game's great quarterbacks do where if you get zero blitzed, he knows he's going to have a guy open, but he needs to buy a second. He's able to drift away from the blitz and then make that pass. Sounds simple, but some guys panic against the blitz. There's a poise and a thoughtfulness about his game that I really like. And then just to keep stacking on stuff I liked about him, is he's not this incredible athlete. He doesn't have this unbelievable arm, but I do think he's a very instinctive improviser. He's very good at when the pressure gets in, doing something about it. And I think when he gets on the move, contrary to what we said about Dillon Gabriel, he has excellent field vision. When he's rolling out, he's able to see guys breaking open and can pull the trigger. He made some really instinctive throws, seeing throws that not a lot of guys can see. So I think if nothing else, my low-end comp on Kyle McCord is Taylor Heinicke. A guy with, decent traits. I think he's a little bigger, his arm's a little bigger, but same idea where you're talking about a guy that can, worst case scenario, a very high floor backup that can actually get hot and go on a stretch for you, as we've seen with Taylor Heinicke in times past. Maybe there's a little bit of Jameis Winston there, though. I don't think he's quite as erratic as Jameis Winston, but that same idea where all right, we're at the end of the year, and our starter went down, our season's probably done, but hey, if Kyle McCord just goes on a 4-game stretch and just doesn't throw the ball over, turn the ball over a bunch, we can win some football games. In an individual game, Kyle McCord has a very high upside. It's just you got to ride that volatile wave. That's a worst case scenario. Best case scenario, he's 22 years old. We're talking about a guy that showed immense growth from his 1 year starting at Ohio State, where he was sitting behind C.J. Stroud. He stuck it out. He played a year. It didn't go well. He transfers away, goes to Syracuse, and takes a massive, massive leap in his game. If this is a dude that is figuring things out and developing quickly, you are talking about a potential starter in the league. And one of my big notes on Kyle McCord is I would have been really fascinated if he bet on himself and went back to Syracuse for a 5th year. He's actually coming out as, 22-year-old 4th-year player. I would imagine he could get a 5th year with, seeing that he was at Ohio State in 2021, which would, I think, get him a COVID year. He elected not to go that route, but it's tough to project things like this. But you compare Kyle McCord now to, and I know where your mind's going when I say this, but Joe Burrow after his 4th year at LSU, when he spent the first 3 years of his career at Ohio State, he was viewed as a 5th-round prospect heading into his 5th season, and then blew up. Jaden Daniels at LSU. 4th season was the transfer year, right? Might have been the 3rd season, but he takes a leap from a 3rd-round prospect to what we've seen now. Bo Nix, one of my pro comps on Kyle McCord, viewed as maybe a day 2 prospect, 5th year at Oregon, proves everybody what he's got. He goes in the top 15. I think there was a chance for Kyle McCord to kind of make that leap. And I don't think that's too crazy for those that have really done the research. So I would have been fascinated if he spent one more year showing us the development, because the jump from 23 to 24 was insane. I think when we've seen a trend of guys like those names I mentioned, it's hard for that thought not to creep into your mind. Like, is this a late bloomer and someone that is very much going to be a starter in the league? And he would, I would say, be the first guy that I watched that really kind of got me excited about the potential of the day 2 quarterbacks in this draft. But let's go to my number 4 guy. Jackson Dart is my number 4 quarterback. I teased it on Twitter. Number 3 was going to be a surprise for some people. It's not the consensus number 3 guy. I think you guys probably have an idea of who it is at this point, but maybe not. But that's not to say you can't get excited about Jackson Dart in his own right. In fact, he does have the same grade as my number 3 guy, a 6.2 grade with a late 2nd, early 3rd round grade. But I do just prefer the other guy a little bit more. But Dart is a very kind of clean slate potential starting prospect with starter tools for the next level. He just checks a lot of boxes, just needs to continue to keep growing across the board with his consistency. You like that he's got smooth, repeatable throwing mechanics. He's got a strong arm. I think he's in the mix for a tough conversation in this draft class for who has the strongest arm. None of these guys have a Will Levis, Anthony Richardson, Caleb Williams level arm strength. But Jackson Dart's up there. He's got a B+ arm strength grade from me, which would land him kind of in the 12 to 20 range of starters in the league, I would say. And Dart might be the most accurate quarterback in this draft to all 3 levels. He's definitely in the conversation there as well. Really doesn't spray a lot of passes, and he does drop some absolute dimes in the vertical passing game as well. I think the processing is pretty good. It's not as good as some other guys in this draft, but generally, plays on time. I think there's plenty of good examples of him making second read throws. And to his credit, Ole Miss ran a pretty gimmicky offense relative to a lot of these guys. So it was a lot of half-field reads and a lot of times where they're not asking him to make full-field progression reads, but they're in there. He's not afraid to do it. He's shown that he can handle that. Just got to get a little bit better at it. And he can make some real anticipation throws as well, where he's letting the ball go before the receiver begins his break. He's a good athlete. He's good at sensing when the rush gets in and doing something about it with his legs. He can be a designed run threat as well. He's got some power to him. There's some plays down by the goal line where he's kind of putting the team on his back, pushing through the defense to get into the end zone. He's a productive, player. He's got 3.5 years of starting experience going back to his freshman year at USC. He got better every single year. Again, there's just a lot of boxes checked with him. That's not to say, though, there aren't some weaknesses, some knocks I have on him. So my holdups on him are, number one, there are some really boneheaded decisions at times. Like some of the biggest, like, what the fuck are you doing throws in this draft, where it seems predetermined. I'm throwing the deep ball. I don't care if there's 3 safeties back there. I'm throwing it anyway, and it gets picked off, or it should have been picked off. There are some, oh, Jackson Dart, no types of throws on there that just inevitably are going to make you wonder, like, what are we seeing here? Are we really processing things the way we need at the NFL level? Number 2, I don't like his pocket feel and spatial awareness. Again, when the rush gets in quickly, he can extend plays, he can do something about it. But there was a lot of 3-man rushes where he's bailing out of clean pockets, taking the check down a little bit too early. There's times where he's got his eyes downfield and he kind of just steps into pressure and gets hit while he's thrown, where it's like, dude, if you felt the rush and you took a step back instead of a step forward, you would have easily hit that throw. And he doesn't really look to use his feet too much. He will at times. It's not a huge weakness, but there were a lot of times where I'm like, instead of you trying to throw a contested catch there, you had room to manage the pocket, whether it's to reset and find a second read or to get out of the pocket, use your ability outside of structure, which is really good. So I just didn't love his pocket feel. It was very Derek Carr-y, dare I say Daniel Jones. It wasn't quite Daniel Jones, but Daniel Jones is like literal pit of the earth, garbage pocket presence. But it was very Derek Carr-y, which this is my second high-end Derek Carr comp in there with Quinn Ewers. Now, I think Jackson Dart has a much better chance of hitting that high-end comp than Quinn Ewers. Let's be clear about that. But my main takeaway with Jackson Dart is I do struggle with him a little bit because I don't think he's this super toolsy prospect. Again, there's a reason the Derek Carr comp is in there. He's athletic, he's got a strong arm, but he's not great in either category. And then he's also not like a really high floor option either. He's kind of caught in the middle of like high floor backup and potential starter in the league. And if you're taking him as a guy that you're like, man, I really hope he hits and becomes a starter someday, how high is his upside really? I struggle with that a little bit. So I do still like him. I have him as a late second, early third round type of guy. And even if the arm isn't amazing and the pocket presence is an issue right now, it's not to say that something can't just really click for him. He is young. He's 22 years old. He has gotten better every year. So it's not to say there isn't hidden upside with any quarterback. I mean, Tom Brady turned into what he is with no mobility at all, right? You know, if you're mental, if you show elite work ethic and elite mentals, any quarterback can be great. You just can't apply that to every quarterback or really assume that any quarterback's going to have that, or you're going to end up overshooting every quarterback, obviously, right? But, you know, obviously there's a chance you take this guy and something really clicks and he's a plus starter. I think realistically, if he hits, you're talking about someone in that kind of QB 18 to 25 bucket, more or less. And is that potentially buying yourself a trip to purgatory like Derek Carr has done throughout his career? I think there's some legitimate questions about just how high the upside is with Jackson Dart. But still, to me, if you find a starter on day 2 of the draft, you're getting a lot of value there. And for some teams, that's going to make a lot of sense. And I do think there's enough upside there if he gets in an elite situation like the Rams. There are enough traits for him to be, in more of a higher echelon of starters as well. So it's a tough balance with a guy like Jackson Dart that I struggle with. But yeah, he ends up as my QB4. But here's the big reveal. My QB3, Tyler Shough out of Louisville. I couldn't believe my eyes when I was watching this guy's tape. And I thought I was crazy. I was like, is this guy not the second or third best quarterback in the draft? And then just doing a little bit of digging, because I try not to look at where most people have these quarterbacks when I go in to watch them. Once I kind of watched 4 games, took my notes. I watched him super late at night. I watched him like 3 in the morning. I watched him a couple more games in the morning, and I was like, I really like this guy. Did a little digging and found out there's a lot of people that really like Tyler Shough as much as QB3. A lot of smart people, a lot of people I really respect. And that was justification for me because I think his tape is fantastic. I would say, to make a strong argument, he has the second best tape in this draft behind Cam Ward. And I actually thought long and hard about making him QB2. I shied away from that because of his biggest weakness in his game, which I'm going to say at the end of this. But I think outside of Cam Ward, Tyler Shough is the biggest passes the eye test QB in this class. Now, it's a mixed bag. There are some real red flags here. He's 25 years old. He's missed 3 seasons with injury. I can't help but think back to Carson Strong, who I thought had a chance to be the best quarterback out of that miserable 2022 draft. The injuries derailed his career. And it is tough to factor in how much does getting 7 years to develop weigh against like a 22-year-old Jackson Dart, who 3 years from now might look a little bit more like Tyler Shough. So it's a tough balance. But he's been around for a long time. He was backing up Justin Herbert at Oregon as a 4-star recruit, by the way, in Justin Herbert's junior year. So he backed up Justin Herbert for 2 years at Oregon. That's how long he's been in college football. You get the COVID year and presumably 3 medical red shirts, maybe 2, and 7 seasons in college football. But the tape is the tape. And quarterbacks are playing deep into their 30s right now. If you can play, you can play. I'm not so worried about it. Now, the injuries, that's a different story, right? He's going to have to clear checks on his shoulders and his knees at the combine. And if he falls to the 6th round, it's really not going to be that big of a surprise. I think that's going to be a heavy tell, like, doctors are out on this dude's durability. And unfortunately, we don't get that information. But based on the tape, there is so much to like about Tyler Shough. Physically, he's a tall, strong-armed quarterback, but he moves really well. And I'm going to say something that's uncomfortable. Strictly speaking, the aesthetic, how tall he is, his size, 6'4", 225, and how athletic he is, the speed, the acceleration, the quick feet, the change of direction for a bigger quarterback, and he's not that physically strong. He also wears number 9. He moves really well in the pocket, which we're going to talk about. There are a lot of shades of Joe Burrow with Tyler Shough. Now, you guys know what I think of Joe Burrow. I'm not saying he's going to be Joe Burrow, but just picture that physical profile and how he moves. It's there. Now, I would say his arm is actually stronger than Joe Burrow, but I don't want to obsess with the Joe Burrow comp because that's obviously incredibly unlikely that he's a top 4 QB in the league. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. But I do think between the ears, he is the best processor in this class. He makes quick reads. He throws with anticipation. He snaps to his second read throws. He will take that first read if it's there, but he's very quick to recognize that it's getting covered up, what the coverage is, and he, better than anybody in this class, will hips, feet, eyes, straight to his next wide receiver, ready to throw. He's really good at beating the blitz. He's up there with Kyle McCord for the best QBs in this draft at beating the blitz. He is not afraid to give his wide receiver a chance, tight man coverage, throw a well-placed ball out in front of the guy, get a contested catch win, as opposed to taking a sack when he is dead to rights. But he can scramble. He can move against the blitz. He'll find answers against the blitz. Now, granted, again, he's been in college for 7 years. He's learned 3 different systems. He's got a lot of good coaching throughout his years. He's had way more time on task. Even if this is his only fully healthy year starting, he has had way more time to work on his technique, to get in the film room and do this kind of stuff. But it is there. He has already shown a lot of the development that you're hoping some of these other guys might have. Beyond the processing, I also think mechanically speaking, he has the best mechanics in this draft from his arms to his legs. outside of one major criticism in his mechanics that does bother me, in that there are a lot of throws where pressure's coming in and he will throw fadeaways. That's self-explanatory, right? Like, he will leave his foundation, and that's where most of his inaccurate throws come from. But beyond that issue, as I said, his footwork is incredibly sharp. He hits the top of his drop. If he likes what he sees, he's ready to throw. He's ready to plant and throw. There's no extra hitches. There's no double pumps. It is ready to go. If he hits the top of his drop and he likes what he sees, the ball is ready to go. But if he doesn't, boom, boom, next read, step, head connected with his feet, ready to go to read number 2. He's got an incredible quick release. One of the best releases in this class in terms of just time to throw, from when he triggers to when the ball's out. And he is really good at adapting his technique, changing arm angles to work the ball around defenders, falling down, bending bullets like Wanted. Just watch the throw against Notre Dame, where he's basically doing like the Mahomes Madden trick shot, where he's falling down and sidearms it and finds the throw. You keep going down the board. Accuracy-wise, he has got it going on. I think he's right next to Jackson Dart in terms of just pure accuracy, in terms of just hitting the mark, not missing your target. Those sprays, if you will, those inaccurate passes, I would say him and Jackson Dart had the least out of them out of anybody in this draft, and that is Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders included. And it's almost like repeatable footwork and throwing mechanics matters when you want to consistently hit your target. I think he also understands ball placement, like we talked about with Kyle McCord. He will throw a go ball up and away from the defender. He will leverage throws against zone coverage into the right spot. A very thoughtful thrower in that way as well. Now, we mentioned it earlier, where you will see his missed throws is when he throws those fadeaways. Would love to see him cut that out of his game. I think it's going to shoot his ceiling up. You talk about pocket presence, I think is overall exceptional, with a major caveat that I'll talk about. But generally speaking, senses pressure exceptionally well. If the rush gets in, if a guard gets beat, if a tackle gets beat, he is elite at avoiding sacks, truly elite. 9.3% pressure to sack ratio. We mentioned Dillon Gabriel was at 14%. That's really good. NFL average is I think it's 19 or 20%. But man, he always knows where his outlet is. His speed to check down, if nothing else, if he has no escape lanes, his ability to just get the ball to his check down so that he doesn't take a sack, it's a rare trait that he has. To be fair, sometimes he does it to a fault, where he's going to his check down blindly, and he got away with some balls that some NFL defenders might be able to take back the other way. So I think he's got to be a little bit more careful with that. Got away with it, but generally speaking, dude, that's where some of those crazy arm angle throws come in, where he's literally getting tackled and he'll bend the ball sidearmed to get to his check down, and there's plays where he gets 8-yard completions out of this that should have been a sack. And then on top of that, he's elusive, he's quick, as we mentioned, doesn't break a lot of sacks, but he can sidestep guys, and he's got the explosiveness to get out of the pocket too. So he's just really good at doing something when pressure gets in to not take a negative play. But I also think he has something that a lot of the quarterbacks we've talked about today don't have, which is that natural feel for the rush. Knowing where he's got to step in the pocket as it's naturally breaking down so that he can have a clean platform to throw from as he gets to his second read. But he also doesn't bail out of clean pockets when he has them. He'll hang in there strong. But he knows when he has to get out of the pocket as well. Just has a very nice balance for that, with a major exception. He did have a garbage offensive line. And you see games, especially the Notre Dame game, first half, things look good. Second half is pressure's coming in all game long. His processors had to be sped up. He does have some games. It's not just the Notre Dame game. He has some games where he gets what you call pocket trauma, where that pocket presence goes to shit, and he becomes a little bit first read and runny. He becomes a little check down happy, and it kind of throws off his game. And that can happen to anybody. It happened to Patrick Mahomes in the Super Bowl against the Eagles. But it does happen to him, I think, a little bit quicker because I think that injury background maybe creeps into his head a little bit. He's like, shit, I'm playing well. If I take the wrong hit, there goes my career. Like, I got an NFL shot here. Like, I'm just speculating, but it did feel like when he started to take a few too many hits, it did derail him. So that's something to keep in mind. It lowers his grade and could hurt him in the pros. But generally speaking, when his offensive line is actually doing their job, he's in a groove. He, to me, showed excellent pocket presence. And then again, that tendency to kind of throw off his back foot, throw those fadeaways when the pressure does get him at times, is also going to kind of hurt his overall pressure management and pocket presence, because I think that is a part of it. And I do think the injury history is a big reason he does that as well. So there really is a lot to like with Tyler Shough. I think everybody getting into his film, at least most people getting into his film, are coming to similar conclusions, and he is definitely rising up people's boards. I can't say I was the first one to find Tyler Shough, but I definitely was happy to see that other people agreed, kind of getting deeper into the class, because he was like the 11th guy I watched, and I was like, this guy's coming up the board for me for sure. A lot to like, but again, a lot of red flags. You got the injury, reckless at times with the football when he's going to those checkdowns in particular. Can be a little bit too desperate to avoid negative plays at times. Mentioned throwing off his back foot, not stepping into pressure. We've hit on all this stuff. There is, I said it at the top of this, one major weakness in his game that was the reason I wasn't willing to go QB2 on Tyler Shough at the end of the day, even though I thought about it. I do think a lot of times he has backup quarterback eyes. And what I mean by that is he doesn't have that kind of killer instinct to want to push the ball downfield at times. I think there are times where he does, but there's a lot of times in games where he doesn't always let routes develop. He's a little quick to come off that deep corner or to wait on that deep dig to come open, and a little bit too eager to just say, yeah, I'm just going to take the check down. You compare him to Shedeur Sanders and Cam Ward at the top, and even some of the other quarterbacks in this draft, but those guys understand you want those chunk plays. You got to hunt for the big game, even if it hurts you at times. And I do think more often than not, going through his game 4 or 5.5 games into Tyler Shough's tape this year, that was where I wanted to like him a little more. And I think some of the explosive stuff, he can make those throws. He does make those throws, but he could do it even more, and he doesn't. I will say, the last thing I'll say on him is he had a garbage surrounding cast. I think he had the worst surrounding cast out of anybody on this list. Offensive line was bad, and I'm telling you, these receivers did him no favors. Ja'Cory Brooks made some tough catches at times. That's about it. I would say if the reason that he didn't have that big game hunting mentality was because he just did not trust the offense. It's his first year healthy as a starter. He's just not quite comfortable waiting for those routes to develop down the field. If he gets to the next level and the offensive line's actually buying him more time to throw, he's got a number one wide receiver out there that is well worth waiting on that corner route to come open, or at least start to come open, and he starts keeping his eyes downfield a little bit more, you are talking about a very good starter in the NFL if he can stay healthy. But at this point in time, I think he processes things very well, but a little bit conservative backup eyes, as I would describe it. And that's the major concern on Tyler Shough that had me pumping the brakes on him a little bit. But he would be the guy I would bet on the most if he can stay healthy to emerge as a starter from day 2 in this draft. Now, QB2, QB1, it's Shedeur 2, Cam Ward 1 for me. That is not new. I did one-off videos on both of these guys. I am still going to talk about them here today, but it's going to be shorter because I've done this. You're a click away from 30, 40-minute full film analysis that are going to do a much better job describing how I feel about these guys, and my opinions on them have not changed since. So I really do recommend you guys, if you've enjoyed this video, to just go check those out. But QB2 for me is Shedeur. I've said it before, I'll say it again. I don't think he's a top 5 pick, realistically. I think there's a good chance he does go top 5 because the New York Giants specifically are just so absolutely desperate. But I would say 9 out of 10 people I talk to, and almost every NFL scout that I've at least heard wind of, basically doesn't have a true first-round grade on Shedeur Sanders and has major concerns that he's a high upside player at the next level. I think everybody agrees he's a smart player. He plays on time. He's an accurate passer, but I think he gets a little bit too much credit for his accuracy. I think he does spray throws. Now he, as I gave credit with Kyle McCord, does really value the ball placement. I think it's his most redeeming quality is how catchable of a football he throws. The processing, the accuracy are good, but leave a little bit to be desired at times. I think he sprays throws, and I think he gets a little bit too much credit for his processing as well from the people that do like him. I disagree that he throws with anticipation. I really think Shedeur is a quarterback that consistently showed on tape he waits for the receiver to come open before he throws the ball and ultimately ends up late on a lot of throws. That can get better at the next level, but I do think that has to get better because I do think Shedeur is a guy that is going to have to beat teams with his accuracy and with his mind. And he's just not quite there. Like, I've seen people comparing him to Joe Burrow, and I just don't see that. Joe Burrow was a truly elite processor and threw with anticipation coming out of LSU. I just don't see that with Shedeur. Now, I think he wants to beat teams from the pocket, but he can extend plays. He's a good athlete. I think there's, from many people that haven't really watched him, just assume because he's Deion Sanders' son, he's this crazy athlete. He's not. He's very much average, and just in terms of the guys we've talked about on this list. He can extend plays. He's creative with his feet. He's a strong guy. He's got contact balance. But he is going to get run down by NFL defensive linemen. He's not this insane athletic threat. And I don't think his overall pocket presence is that great either to be a great play extender. He likes to drop back in the pocket really far, and then he gets himself in trouble. He tries to run away from guys, and he can do that against, the level of competition he's going against, these college defenders. He can get away with it at times. At other times, he's taken a lot of bad sacks. He does. He takes a lot of bad sacks. But I'm worried about him having more negative plays than you'd like to see at the next level. And I just see a very solid, good quarterback prospect. If you want a high floor starting option, my low-end comp on him is Teddy Bridgewater, which was, when healthy, definitely a starting caliber player in the league. My high-end comp, though, is Brock Purdy. I just don't see the traits, the upside, the dynamism, difference-making ability from Shedeur to really justify a top 5 pick. I think you're risking getting something closer to what the Dolphins have gotten with Tua with a top 6 pick, what the Giants got with Daniel Jones. Say what you want about Daniel Jones. He had a season as a top 24 quarterback. But I would be worried about that type of deal with Shedeur going quite so high. But once you get into the second half of the first round, I think you can justify it. But I will say, as we transition to my number 1 quarterback, Cam Ward, Shedeur to me is much closer to the last 3 guys we talked about than he is to Cam Ward at number 1. And while people say there aren't any good quarterbacks in this draft, I just couldn't disagree with that more. I really do think Cam Ward is a genuinely good quarterback prospect, not the ideal type of guy to take number 1. You'd wish there were a, Caleb Williams level guy, a Trevor Lawrence level guy. That just doesn't exist in this class. But I do think the upside on Cam Ward is high enough to justify taking him with the number 1 pick. I think he can be a top 12 quarterback in the league. And I also think his floor is higher than he often gets credit for. He's aggressive. He throws a lot of picks. His eyes get bigger than his stomach a lot of times. When he throws the ball on the move, he doesn't have a rocket arm. He can make throws that he thinks he can make that he just can't. And he has some of the uglier interceptions out of any quarterback that we've talked about here today. But I think that overshadows the fact that I think he's a much smarter quarterback than he gets credit for. I think he's just as good as at Shedeur at playing on time, the quick processing. And I apologize I didn't break down quick processing versus advanced processing. I did in both the Cam Ward and Shedeur videos if you're interested there. There's also more in the description below that you can read up on. But the quick processing on Cam Ward is the same as Shedeur as we saw. But you want to talk about advanced processing, which are anticipation throws, getting to your second read, especially with the anticipation there. I think Cam Ward makes some really high-end NFL throws that he often doesn't get credit for. Stuff that shows real nuance, a real understanding of what coverage he's getting, where the leverage of the defense is. Again, this is stuff I broke down in that video. But I think that gives him a much higher floor than people give him credit for. And the other thing that gives him an exceptional floor is he has by far the best pocket feel in this draft. He's great at sensing pressure and making stuff happen when pressure gets in quickly. But with Cam Ward, it's what he does when he isn't pressured that is so special. He will recognize when he has a clean pocket, it's cool to just hang out. And he's just even keel about it. He'll sit in the pocket as long as he needs to and wait for someone to come open, get those higher percentage looks down the field. If that pocket's breaking down, he consistently steps in the right place to help his offensive line win angles, keeps his eyes downfield while doing so. He doesn't need to dip his head and look at the rush. And if he's about to get sacked, if he knows he needs to get out, he will do that. And when he does get on the run and outside the pocket and scramble drill, he has insane instincts. He sees throws down the field, even if there's some throws he makes, maybe 4 or 5 times a season. His eyes get bigger than his stomach, as I described. 5 times over, he sees throwing opportunities, converts them, and he's a good scrambler as well. On top of that, he's a good threat as a design runner. That can raise the floor of your offense. He's big. He's 6'2", 223, contact balance. He can juke you. I really, really like Cam Ward. And in fact, the one thing that has changed since that video I made in December is I've actually cranked his grade up even more, up to a 6.60 from that 6.50. It's minutia, but it's fun to take that grade and compare it to years past. That's going to put him actually over like the Justin Fields, Trey Lance, Anthony Richardson, Jordan Love going back. Even if the final pro comp, one of them at least, is Jordan Love, that's more comparing him to what Jordan Love has been in the pros, not Jordan Love the prospect that was more of a risk. But it's just noting that he's not as much of that kind of project type than some of these other quarterbacks. And looking back on it, I can say, yeah, he stacks up. I would take him inside the top 5, the top 10. Like I would have said on those other quarterbacks, well worth the risk. And even over the last month, the analysis really hasn't changed on Cam Ward since that video. It very much holds its weight here 2 months later. But I have actually risen the grade a little bit from a 6.50 to a 6.60. It emphasizes that gap that I have between him and Shedeur. But it's also fun to take that grade, compare it retroactively to some other guys. Thinking back on it, I do like Cam Ward as a prospect more than I like Justin Fields. I like him as a prospect more than Trey Lance. Even Jordan Love, the prospect, that were more in that 6.5 range. I am comfortable cranking the grade up on Cam Ward, saying, yes, he is worth a top 10 pick any given draft. And in this draft, when you're a little more desperate, you need the quarterback. Sure, would you rather take him at 4 than at 1? Yeah, absolutely. But if he's the best option, he's well worth taking him at number 1, in my opinion. Talking to you, Tennessee Titans. So I think this is becoming more and more the consensus opinion on Cam Ward, but I do think he's a fantastic prospect. Again, go check out the video I made on him if you want even more in-depth discussion on him. But that is going to do it for this grind of a top 10 quarterbacks video. A lot of research went into this bad boy, but I hope you guys enjoyed. I hope you're able to kind of reference back to this when these guys, especially QB, I mean, frankly, I would say QB 2, including Shedeur. I know that's hot, but 2 through 8 or 9, depending how you feel about Quinn Ewers, it will be fun to kind of take this skill set, see where they land, and start to discuss, what does that mean for their future? Because with a lot of these guys, it's going to be the systems they land in, who are their coaches, who do they get to throw to, what is their protection going to look like. That's going to lead to whether or not they turn out. But again, a lot of depth in this class. I think we do get multiple starters out of this draft class that is deemed so bad. It's just different. It's just unique. Really like Cam Ward at the top, and then we'll see on the rest of the guys. But that's going to do it. Let me know what you guys think of the rankings. Do you think anybody got snubbed? If you're interested in the other quarterbacks I've written up or just all of the prospects I've evaled so far, you can get access on my Patreon to my full draft guide. We also have an exclusive film breakdown on Jackson Dart up there if you want to check that out, and support my channel in the process as well. Please do hit that like button on the way out too, by the way. It really helps me out. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss my remaining positional rankings. I'm done talking. Hope you enjoyed the video. Peace out.